I can send you the link. They're really good, service-wise and everything else.
Yeah, because honestly, what we have is nothing.
Yeah, this is really good.
Bob, you're on the air. Bob, you're on the air.
We're on the air, thank you. It's like Santa Claus.
From the North Pole, huh?
Only from the North Pole.
You guys look a lot better from here.
Likewise, Steve.
Tough getting parking out there, Bob.
Really?
It's tear out, what they call it, it's a trailer stand. He goes, "You got your kid, man?" I said,
Beautiful day, all by myself.
No phone didn't ring, no email.
the chips off. I mean, it chips back to, everything we do.
Gotta drop it. There.
I feel better.
I go, I'm down there.
We're talking for our modeling, Randy.
Right up to the top.
Hope he's not making a mistake.
I'd like to call this meeting to order, please. Time is exactly 6:30. I'd like to start with roll call, starting to my right. John Miller.
Jonathan Archer.
James Connolly.
Sharon Husky McLaughlin. Patty Porter.
Randy Banana, school board rep.
Mark Connolly.
Chip Huzzy?
Brian Hansler.
Bob Cresco.
Steve McKenzie.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Do you hear me?
Yep.
Can you hear me? Okay.
We We have a quorum and we're being recorded. Okay? I'd like to have a motion to accept the minutes of the last meeting.
Make a motion that we accept the minutes of the meeting held November 27th, that's published.
Second?
All those in favor? Okay, thank you. We're gonna start this evening with the fire chief. He wasn't here for the first go-around, and I asked Ralph if he'd come in tonight before school board came on. So Ralph, would you please take a seat next to Patty?
Sure. Sorry. As you people can see, the budget basically stayed the same. Some items went way down, like the stipend money went down quite a bit. So there really wasn't a lot of changes. We had to buy some new fire gear because we had a fire down next to the pizza shop. The gear got contaminated, so we had to do that, buy some extra gear through that. This past year, next year, the only thing I'm looking for under a warrant article, which hopefully is gonna come out of the ambulance replacement fund, or that whole fund, is to get a second set of gear for all the firefighters, with the new cancer laws coming out, and cleaning the gears, and right now we went to stripping of gear at the fire scenes and putting them in bags to get them clean, so hopefully we can slow some of this stuff down, with all the contaminants that's in the fire gear. Other than that, not a lot has changed. We're still working on full-time people. That's starting to come around a little bit. We give another offer today to a gentleman, which I rather not say who that is at this point, but he has a lot of experience and is coming from another department. So we're working on that, and then I'll be looking for one more person after that. Does anybody have any questions on what we did in the fire department or on the budget at all?
Yeah, thank you. So, you said you had, last year you asked for 2 full-time fire,
Yep.
right? And so we haven't hired them?
We haven't hired them because of everybody in the Northeast is trying to hire firefighters.
Yeah.
So they're far and few between, so that's been just a tough thing. They're gonna go to a bigger department than they are, and they're gonna go to a smaller department, a startup department, I'm calling it.
Yeah.
So that's been just a little tough to get the right person, and I don't wanna hire the wrong person.
Yeah, absolutely. You're still having staffing problems? So even though you haven't been able to hire them?
No, we're still using the stipend people that we were using. The stipend people are down a little bit, because 2 or 3 of them had got jobs full-time, different departments. And again, I tried to hire one of them, and that didn't work, because he wanted to go to a bigger department that was already established and going, and more people.
Thank you.
Could you explain something probably to the rest of us, I'm familiar with it, that getting these stipend people to come in that are fully qualified, if they work for another department, they can't come here as a per diem employee. They've got a union.
If they are full-time, within the union, they can't come back to us as a per diem firefighter. Right now, we're sharing some people. We're sharing some people from Epping, Stratham, sharing some people from Newcastle. We're just kind of sharing some people per diem because they only can work 32 hours in our department, and they can do that at different places also. But, again, these people are definitely they're trying to make a career out of firefighting, and they're just trying to go through some schooling.
Chief, I have a question in reference to the fire that we had downtown next to the pizza shop.
Yep.
There'd be insurance involved with the property there.
We tried to
Where
get
is
them,
it?
and they rejected us. So we went through Primex and we're just waiting for the funds to come in. We're gonna get $10,000 back. which is gonna pay for the gear that we had to buy.
How much gear did we lose in that fire?
It was like 8 sets,
And that represents how many dollars?
it's $3,000 a set. That's just for the
So we're
fans.
getting 10 for 24.
Yeah.
How about the ambulance scenarios of collecting money back?
We're doing pretty good. The Comstar is doing very well with the ambulance collection. We're, just yesterday, we had $7,000 come in. Paramedics, of course, we can charge more money having the paramedics. Collections have been doing pretty well on that. I do believe, and I can't, this isn't gospel, I think we got probably $150,000 at this point. Excuse me. So the ambulance is really helping us buy different things that we need in the fire department and put them in on warrant articles. It isn't nothing to do with the tax, going to the tax base.
Thanks, Chief.
Ralph, would you bring the committee up to snuff about the roof that was taken care of on the old fire station, please?
The new roof ended up being, they stripped the old styrofoam roof, I gotta call it, off, and they put a rubber roof up on top. And I believe, we ended up saving a little bit of money there. We're doing, the next thing we're gonna do is, some construction on some of the beams on the lower of the beams where the water's been getting in. So we're working, trying to find, a welding company to come in and take care of those beams. But the roof is complete at this point, and the welding should be complete before the first of the year.
Okay. Another question. Now that we have all these new homes out back here, do you have enough equipment to handle anything out there?
At this point, we have enough equipment, and we got enough mutual aid that's coming in. We bring in mutual aid on any smoke in a building, and they're coming automatically, and that's what we do for other departments also.
One question on the roof, what type of warranty do we get on that roof?
I don't remember. Karen had all that. I think it's either 15 or 20 year, I think it's 15 or 20 years.
Is it a ballast roof,
It's a rubber,
membrane?
rubber membrane,
What goes in
that is fasteners, yep.
Fasteners.
I've had some experience with this rubber roof that they put on. They put it on one of my buildings 5 years ago. I haven't had one bit of problem.
Good.
Tecta Engineering out of Maine. Oh, they're all over.
Steve, do you have any questions?
No.
Anybody else have any questions for the chief? Okay, thank you, Ralph.
Thank you.
Amy's gonna sit over
Just for the presentation and
for the presentation. You can see the screen. Just sit over here.
no, you see it, the back sheet, right behind you. You're welcome. Oops, sorry. Do you want me to tell Charlotte to mail them?
I don't, when are you coming back, Steve?
The 6th of December.
I can email a PDF if you like.
Take care of it.
You're welcome. Anybody else would like copies? I do.
No, this is the presentation.
Is everybody back? I want to get started without
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming for the school board's presentation of the school district budget. My name is Amy Ransom. I'm the business administrator for SIU 50, if I hadn't had a chance to meet you last year. I see some new faces around the table. So what I'm going to do is the presentation's about 14 slides long. I'm going to go through the whole presentation, give you some ins and outs and changes, and then I'm sure there'll be some questions afterwards. Okay, so the items that will be covered this evening are the review of the budget books themselves, review of the FY20 default budget, the review of FY20 proposed budget, and the status of the trust funds. The school board is not bringing forward warrant articles this evening, so those won't be discussed in this presentation. The books were delivered to Town Hall on Tuesday, the 20th of November. I'm very happy to say a day earlier than I had promised them to the Budget Committee. The layout is the same as last year with the exception of a table of contents that shows you how the items are grouped and give you ranges of page numbers for you to find those documents that have been referenced. I listened to your minutes of your meeting in October, and it was brought to my attention also by Mr. Bunnell that the Budget Committee had questions about the SAU budget and the calculation for the Portsmouth High School tuition. I've included these documents for you behind section 8 of the budget book. The apportionment for the SAU budget is based on the guidelines under RSA 194C9. So that's where that calculation comes from. It's not something that the SAU agreed upon themselves. It's driven by the state law. I've also included the tuition schedule that was used to calculate this year's Portsmouth High School tuition and all the documents for the area agreement. Those are also in the book for your reference. If the Budget Committee would like, I'm more than happy to come back and review how the Portsmouth High School tuition is calculated. I offered last year, but I'm more than willing to come back again and explain to you how they come up with the tuition rate for the Portsmouth High School students. Okay, I'm just briefly going to go over this page for you because some of you aren't used to seeing how I present the budget. Mr. Katkin was much more into words and narratives. I'm more into spreadsheets and presentations. So this is on page 1 of your book. It's broken into 3 sections. This section right here is the 17-18 budget and the 17-18 actual. I did make a mistake. I hit a plus sign here, so I want to tell you the budget for 17-18 was $9,875,983. So I just wanted to tell you this little housekeeping piece didn't go through. But as you can see, this is the yellow section. So if you want to know what was the budget and what was spent for 17-18, you would look here. This is the budget 18-19 that we're working with right now. I broke it out by salary in this column, non-salary in this column. If you add the two together, you'll get the total operating budget for the 18-19 school year. We use this budget to start the default budget. There have been some changes in the default law. I'll go over that shortly, but I just want you to know that this is where we come up with the baseline for the default budget. The salary and non-salary items here in the green section do the 19-20 default. If you add these two together, they'll give you the default. If you add these two and the requests, that gives you the proposed. So as you're looking at this page, you'll just know how these all go together. Sorry. Okay, so the proposed operating budget has an increase of 4.93% over the current year's operating budget. The default budget itself has an increase of 2.37% over the current year's budget. I'll go into more details about the main drivers of these increases and decreases, but I just wanted you to be able to see the proposed operating budget the school board is presenting is $11,416,938. The default operating budget would be $11,138.92. Million, sorry. 92 cents. Last year, the Budget Committee had asked for some historical information, so this I've added into the presentation, just so you can see where the budget has been. I just put in the 19-20 operating budget for comparison purposes only. Not making any assumptions, it just helps show where the percentage increase is coming from and how it relates to the prior years. If the proposed budget were to pass, the 3-year average would be 5.7% and the 5-year average would be 6.14%. So as you can see, the 1920 budget comes below that, the yearly averages. Okay. The default budget has had quite a few changes this year. I don't know if any of you have heard of the changes to the SB2 law and the definition of a default budget. There was legislation that was passed in the spring that was enacted into law this summer that changes how we calculate the default budget. So you might notice from last year's budget form, there's a lot more ins and outs. There's a lot more reds and blacks showing things going in and out of the proposed and the requests column. What they did mainly was the definition and clarification of what can and cannot be put in the default budget was clarified. They added additional wording, and one of the biggest changes was contracts, whether or not contracts can go into the default budget or not go into the default budget. For example, the easiest one for me is transportation. Say we have a 5-year transportation agreement. It has a 5% escalation clause in it every year. According to the new law, I cannot put the increase to the next year's contract in the default budget. I have to put it in the proposed. Historically, school districts would put that in their default budget because they said, I have a signed contract. According to this new law, you don't have a contract that allows you to increase the rate each year. But you do with, say, teacher contracts. When you have a teacher contract that goes out, you put out the teacher's contract and you tell the taxpayers for the next 3 or 5 years, this is how much it's going to cost you. And that's called standardizing. And I have notified you in advance of the potential cost over the length of this contract. We don't do that with transportation contracts. We don't do that with copier contracts. We've always just built those in saying we have a signed contract. The new law says we can't do that. So one of the things you'll see is, for example, transportation. The estimated increase is going to be in the proposed column. I can't put that in the default. They also have said increases to health insurance, dental insurance is not allowed in the default budget for non-union staff members. So I can put the teacher's health insurance increases in the default budget, but say I can't put the custodians or the principals. That has to go in the proposed. So you're going to see a lot of things that you didn't normally see in the proposed column just because of the changes to the law. But please keep in mind, IEPs are still in the default budget because those are federally mandated. So that's not up for, for any changes. The contract may go up for a placement or for a contracted service or anything like that. That is still going in the default budget because we have to provide those services to students.
Excuse me, this is Steve McKenzie. So is that why the special ed default budget went up so much?
Well, the special ed default budget went up based on students' IEPs, not necessarily because of the new budget law. Depends on what the students' needs are at this time is what goes into the default budget.
And how do you determine that?
I meet with the special ed director and we discuss all the students' IEPs and those services and how that calculates out whether it's contracted services for speech or OT or PT or even transportation for a student. Some students need extended year services. Some have out-of-district placement. And we sit down and talk about those students and how that costs out into the budget.
And that's changed since last year?
Students' needs change every year, but the law is still the same.
Okay, that's...
Okay. So now we're going to review the default budget. This is in your book. I put it up on the screen so you can see some of the changes. This is the 18-19 salary that we're working with currently. It's in green. The default salary is in peach. The difference between the two is this column here.
Do you have a page, please?
Oh, sorry. The one page I did not write in my little PowerPoint presentation for myself. It is page 38.
Saves me from flipping through.
Oh, that's okay. I put notes like on page this, on page that. That one I did not. So this shows you by salary. non-salary items, the differences between on default. So I think it's important, sometimes people think default budgets just always go up, they always go up. We never see anything go down in default budgets. And I just wanted to point out there are changes. You know, we do have things go down in non-salary items. Here's debt service. Here's tuition to Portsmouth High School. So we do reflect when items do go down in the default budget. So I just wanted, I felt it was important to show you those changes. The default budget includes the teachers' raises. This is the 4th year of a 5-year collective bargaining agreement. Changes in salary are seen across multiple functions. And if you don't know what a function is, these are functions. Regular ed, special ed, guidance. This is how the state classifies our budget, so they're called functions. So we have multiple people across functions that are part of our collective bargaining agreement. So regular ed teachers, special ed teachers, guidance, nurse, school psychologists, things like that. Those are all part of our collective bargaining agreement, and their raises are in the default budget. I just want to point out to you that last year our default salary increases was around $79,000. This year they're at $31,000. And there are multiple factors that play into the reason why we have a lower increase of the default salary. The reason is partly because we've had a lot of change in staff from last year to this year. We had 11 changes in personnel. So as people have retired or left, the new hires have come in at, in some cases, not always less, but in most cases less than the employees that have left. For example, we have a new assistant principal, a new art teacher, a new STEM teacher, 2 new front-end office people. If anyone's been into the Greenland Central School, they'll see 2 new faces. So the net savings of the change in staffing is reflected in the salary section of the default budget. The default budget also includes a reduction of 1 classroom teacher based on enrollment and the number of certified staff that are needed to fulfill the district's obligation for classroom teachers. So I just want to point out there is actually 1 less teacher in the default budget. There is a decrease, as you can see, to the Portsmouth tuition line of approximately $59,791 for the 1920 school year. This is based on the estimated enrollment of 166 students versus 172 students last year. We use the October 1 number. Most of our numbers that we use to do reporting on is the October 1 number. It could have gone down or up since that date, but this is the number that I use is October 1. The special education budget increased by approximately $161,000. This includes the salaries per the CBA for services required by students' IEPs. For the cost of an additional paraprofessional, we do have a need for a shared paraprofessional. That goes into the default budget because it's per the students' IEPs. If we have out-of-district placements, there are increases to those costs that have been decided by the state of New Hampshire. They allow certain increases to those placements, and the districts have taken advantage of those. So those increased costs are also in here. And New Hampshire Retirement did have changes to the employer portion of rates in the upcoming year. The current rates are 11.38 for employees and 17.36 for teachers. They will be changing to 11.18 for employees, so a decrease, and up to 17.8 for teachers, so there will be an increase in the teacher part of New Hampshire Retirement. That's a 2-year rate, so we won't see that change for 2 years, which is helpful because there was one time when they completely changed the rate without any notification. There is an increase of $63,830 in the district's portion of the SAU office budget. This is based on the proposed operating budget that will be officially voted on December 19th at the joint board meeting in Rye. There is also a reduction to the debt service for principal and interest due on the bond, which is only $3,426, but it's always nice to see the change in things. Okay. There are a lot of changes in the proposed operating budget. I can't fit them all onto one screen. For the purposes of the presentation, I stuck to changes in staffing, though I will go into detail on other things, but just for this slide, I did changes in staffing. One thing that always is asked of me is how come they can't get the budget sooner? How come we can't get the budget any sooner? The principals in all of the towns are required to get me their budget by October 1st. The teachers aren't in July and August. So that means the principals only have 1 month to work with their staff to find out what they need, changes in enrollment, changes in staffing, any changes in programming. The principal only has 1 month to put that together. Then it's turned into me on October 1st. So I have 5 building requests that come into me all at the same time. Greenland and Rye are priority because they're SB2, but everything comes into central office all at the same time. So the Principal Hallie turned in her request to me October 1st. Some of her requests included additional staff, supplies, equipment. We reviewed these requests with the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, and the special education director before it was presented to the Greenland School Board. The Greenland School Board reviewed the budget 3 times before their final review and approval on November 19th. So I literally turned your budget books around in 1 day. So it's as soon as we can get the board to review it, go through it, make any changes, review it again, then I get it to the budget committee. So if they had a meeting the week before that, I would have been able to get it to you then, but there are changes and questions that they have, just like you'll have questions. I've listed the main drivers that were approved by the school board and placed in the proposed budget. Besides the staffing changes and benefits related to those changes, I will touch on proposed changes above $5,000. When you look at sections 2, pages 12 through 20, you'll see a lot of ins and outs, but I'm only going to touch on those that are above $5,000, or else I'd be reviewing this presentation for a lot longer. This summer, the board hired a .25 Spanish teacher for the 3rd and 4th grade to work during the 18-19 school year. Since this position was not budgeted for, we have to put it into the proposed budget per the new default budget law. We didn't have a contract at the time that the governing body, the voting body, which is the townspeople of Greenland, voted on it. So now we have to put it forth in the proposed column. The cost for this, salaries and benefits, which you could find in page 12, between the 12 and 20, is $13,325. During the summer, some of you may have heard, the school district had a major technology issue with the crash of its main server, resulting in the loss of years of collected data. As part of an SAU-wide technology audit that was paid for out of the SAU budget, the board has decided to move the technology teacher over to a regular teaching position, hence the reason why there will be 1 less teaching position in the default budget. And then add a technology coordinator position into the proposed operating budget with a cost of $68,552 for salary and benefits. The school board has also removed the stipend for additional technology duties from the proposed operating budget. This stipend-related benefits is a savings of $11,291. So the net cost of the new position would be $57,262. At the request of the principal, the board has added 5 hours to the week, or an hour a day, for the school nurses position. This is an hourly position and is being increased based on the amount of time the nurse is required to perform duties, meetings that are taking place after school. The cost of the salary and benefits for this would be $4,370. The principal also requested that the board add 7 additional work days to the school receptionist. This is also an hourly position and is being increased based on the duties that need to be completed during the summer. Registrations for kindergarten, order processing, and other items that need to be done while there's nobody in the building. This cost is for...
Can you repeat that?
Yep, they have to do registrations for kindergartners, they do summer ordering, they check in summer ordering, and other duties that need to be done during the summer when there are no students in the building.
So is this more work this summer than it has been in other summers?
We've been identifying things that need to be done over the summer. With Principal Hallie having been there for a year, I've been there for a year, there are some things that just need to take place during the summer, and we don't have enough time during the regular school year to have her do it.
Okay, thank you.
So the cost for the salary and benefits would be $956. The raises for non-union staff of 3% applies not only to the administrative staff, but to paraprofessionals, custodians, food service workers, and all other non-union staff at Greenland Central School. This comes to $27,703 in salary and related benefit increases.
Amy,
Yes.
go ahead.
Could I have a question? How did you come up with a 3% on that though? school board?
The school board had been looking at what their rates of pay for support staff are in the area. We had looked at it in a board meeting, I believe, in August or September. And this was the number that I brought forward after looking at other towns in the surrounding areas for support
The
staff.
only reason I ask is because the CPI COLA for this year for the federal government is 2.8, and the town has kind of agreed to go at 2.75 for the across the board raise. And, I mean, 0.25 may not be a lot, but $1,000 is $1,000. So I just was curious as to where you came up with your figures.
Yeah, we did do a compensation study as well for administration and non-union staff. And some things are below average, some things are above average, but it seemed like a reasonable percentage. Plus historically that we've come in at 3%.
Actually, last year, I think it was 2.75.
Yeah, 2.75.
In the town it was 3.0. And frankly, we're having
Catch up.
trouble recruiting people at that $12 and $13 level. It's really difficult.
I think it's challenging to have one rate for one area and a different rate for the other area, and you're all in the same game. I think it would be more pleasing to all involved to have the same rate in years going forward, rather than fix different amounts.
You mean town and school?
Yes.
But sometimes we really should be doing school versus school, really.
Well,
The community.
that's a view. That's the view you carry. I think that if you're a secretary here in this building and you're a secretary in the school building, I suggest that possibly the scope of work is similar, and therefore the pay increases should be similar.
Well, I don't think you can compare the scope of work similar, because I think there are a lot of non-union employees at the school that aren't secretaries that actually deal with a lot of challenging situations. So, you know, I don't think you can really put two and two together.
I bring the comment up because there are people in this town on fixed incomes who have no option as to whether or not they get a 2.8 or 3.5. So that's my rationale behind that question and for your consideration.
I'm not sure if I mentioned earlier, but we received our GMR from Health Trust for health insurance at 6.7%. Last year we had 1.7%, so just to give you something to go by. Dental increases is 2.3%, which is the same as last year. So because of the SB2 law, I had to break out union and non-union. The cost of these increases to benefits is $15,827. There is an increase to special education legal fees of $5,000 for anticipated continued need for legal services at the high school level. There is an increase of $5,126 to library media internet subscriptions for some online curriculum called Freckle, which is for math and reading, and IXL, which is for math. Principal Hallie is available.
You're reading these figures, where are they? They're in the book someplace.
Between pages 20 and 22. That number is on page 16.
I think Amy, you're doing a general overview, and
Yes.
we're gonna do more detail when she comes over and joins us.
Yeah, this is just for the record for Charlotte and for people in the audience that don't have a book.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, please?
Go ahead, Steve.
Just going back to page 14. Under tuition to other LEAs, special ed. There's a substantial increase in the default budget and accordingly in the regular proposed budget. Could you explain that? It's over $100,000.
Mr. Krasko, can I just ask if I can go all the way through the presentation and then come back to line-by-line questions, or else?
Okay,
This
Steve, she's gonna come back after she's all done the presentation, she'll answer your question, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
On page, just in case anybody wants to review the page, on pages 16 and 17 is probably one of our largest increases. Technology has an increase to technology hardware additional for $8,776, And then technology hardware replacement of $54,237. These items are based on requests to replace what was cut from last year's budget into this year's operating budget, and which is also to bring back the replacement cycle of hardware in the building. This is also tied to the technology audit that the SAU did on all of the buildings in SAU 50. We do have a listing of all those. I did not put them on the spreadsheet, but the principal and I both have all the lists for all the requests for the hardware for technology. Roofing repairs has an additional $9,000 for repairs to the roof at Greenland Central School. Based on an independent audit of the facilities and its needs, it was documented that the roof has multiple areas of immediate and needed repair. We're hoping to get through this year, but they did document all of the repairs for us in a proposal. That's on page 18. Buildings and Grounds Upkeep has a request of an additional $18,343 for new fencing, tree trimming of overhanging branches, edging, and repairs of planting beds, edging to the parking lot, the edging that goes around the parking lot. Principal Hallie has those quotes as well. Non-instructional equipment repairs has a request of $6,200 for the replacement of water bubblers per the health inspection. That's on page 19. And transportation has an increase of $8,286 for the estimated 3% increase to the transportation contract. We're currently in negotiations with First Student, but Superintendent Petralia has been working with them, and right now it is looking that we'll have approximately a 3% increase for the next year's transportation budget. One of the other questions or comments that I heard at your budget committee meeting was how much of the budget is discretionary and how much is contractually obligated. This pie chart is in your book, also under section 4. And what this shows you is it breaks out for you the items that we really have no control over. Tuition to Portsmouth High School here is approximately, my own spreadsheet, 28% of the budget. The bond for the school is 4%. Salaries is 34%, and benefits is 16%. Also, the SAU assessment here, the budget, the board has no control over. That's voted on by the joint board. That makes up approximately 90% of your budget that the school board really has no control over. It's either collectively bargained, federally mandated, state mandated, anything like that. That's what drives these numbers for us. Contracted service here and maintenance and grounds here make up about 9% of the budget. But in contracted service are a lot of items based on IEPs. So we're contracted. We have to provide those services. So yes, there are parts in contracted services. The copier is in there. You know, trash services, some things like that are in contracted services and maintenance and grounds. But so are heat, lights, water, sewer, things that we need to run the building. So I guess I really would like to point out to you that equipment, which is so small it's not even registering as a percent on this, and supplies registers just about 1%. We have about $125,000 worth of truly discretionary items that the school board can work with. Most everything else in this budget, we're tied to a formula, and this is where we get most of our budget from.
One comment, please, up. It's not quite exactly 100% accurate that there's no control over salaries.
If it's a CBA, it's collectively bargained and I have no control.
Agreed, but we're not talking about years where we're going to go into that. That's controllable. Mm-hmm. We're also not talking about the number of staff. So I understand, but it's not completely 100% non-controllable. I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, if the school board chose to have different size class sizes or change in staffing or the number of custodians, yes, it's completely controllable by the school board. But based on the people that we have and the definition of a default budget, these really aren't. I mean, somebody's not going to take a pay cut usually to reduce the school's budget. You may have the change when you have turnover. We always try to make those choices and the best hire that works out best for students and for the budget, but it's always what's best for students that comes first. Okay, just some little bit of facts for you. As I said, these numbers are based on our October 1. There were 413 students at Greenland Central School, and these are broken out for you by grade level. There are approximately 60 students that are Greenland students. Now, these are high school students, elementary students. This isn't just at Greenland Central School, that are receiving special education services. That could be any level of special education services. This is around 10%, and this is less than the state average, and it is down from last year. Last year we had approximately 15%. Just a review for you, these are the current status of the school district's trust funds. The tuition expendable trust fund has approximately $188,749 in it. The tuition for Portsmouth High School is right around $17,511 per student.
That's an estimate though, right?
Yes, they don't give me a hard number until,
Okay, so that's what you estimated based on historical percentages?
Yes.
Okay.
I did ask the Portsmouth business administrator for last year he gave me a hard budget number. This year he didn't, so
Okay.
I had to use the average.
Thank you.
The Special Education Expendable Trust Fund has a current balance of just over $100,000. Depending upon how things may turn out this year, I'm putting down we have an anticipated withdrawal. I'm not exactly sure what that is right now. We're going to wait till we get past the new year to see where things settle out with how the operating budget's doing, how heating oil is doing. We had less students go to Portsmouth High School than we budgeted for, so we have a little bit of savings there. So maybe I can use the savings from Portsmouth to pay for some special education costs. So that's still a moving target, but I just wanted you to be aware that we might take money out of that trust fund.
May we discuss special ed a little more here?
I only have 3 more slides.
$75,000 warrant article last year. Are you proposing any this year?
Excuse me, Steve. We'll discuss that after she's done, okay?
No, we're talking about it now in the default budget.
We're just giving a general overview.
And I think there's things in the default budget that are not.
Steve, yep. We'll discuss that after she's done. She's almost done, okay? Please.
I only have 1 more slide. So this is the School Buildings and Grounds Property Trust Fund. The current balance is $59,789, and this is paid for from the SAU office rental income. And that's it. Now we'll come over to the hot seat.
Thank you, Amy. Now you can come sit and deal with us.
Chairman, can we recognize the school administration in the audience?
Yes, you may.
There to support.
Go right ahead, please.
Start with Sal.
Recommend what?
Just to announce that we're here.
Introduce ourselves?
Yes,
please.
Good evening, everyone. Sal Petralia, Superintendent, SAU 50. We also have Central Office Administration here present. Kelly Killen, Assistant Superintendent. Sarah Reinhardt, Director of Special Education. We have Principal Tamara Halley from Greenland Central School. And we also have board members present, Patrick Walsh, Chairperson, Mr. Bennell, who serves as the liaison for the Budget Committee, also on the school board, and also Allison Barriamas, school board member, and Maria Emery in the audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to answer this gentleman's question?
Yes.
Okay, Steve, go ahead.
Okay, I've seen a number of increases in the special ed budget, particularly in the default budget, that I'm not sure why they're in there for things that may or may not happen. And there was a warrant article last year. We have money in the budget for that, in a special reserve account. And I don't know if there's going to be another proposed warrant article for special ed this year or not. But the default budget is what concerns me, because it increases the default budget, in a way that I'm not sure it's called for.
Okay, in regards to the special education trust fund, the special education trust fund is for unanticipated special ed costs. So, for example, I would say if a student moved in from another community and required a placement of, I've had it happen, $750,000 and the district doesn't have it because this child moved in April, I still have to provide those services to that student at that placement. So I would use that money in the unanticipated special ed trust fund to pay for those. If we have a student currently in our system with an IEP that's been approved, I know what those costs are. Those are anticipated and belong into the operating budget because I know those services are being provided to that student. Students may be added or discharged from their IEPs over the course of time, but we do look at what's happening today. Do you think that child's going to be discharged by the end of the year? Yes or no? Or is their IEP going to remain status quo? And if that's the case, that's the information that we use to create our budget. Special education constantly changes, and we do our best to make sure we put our anticipated costs in, but we don't add additional costs into the special education budget.
Well, I'm not sure it's all allowable into the default budget.
It's our current cost, Steve. So, I mean, let me say first, I share your concerns, right? Special education is a very large percentage of our budget. There are, unfortunately, we have children that have special needs, and some of these schools are very expensive. So, but the cost that we have in the default budget is anticipating the same treatment for these children that they're going to need next year.
Well, but it wasn't reflected in this year's budget. I mean, you got in that one line item, you got $100,000 increase.
But students change and students' needs change from year to year. So when the 18-19 budget was created, we may or may not, I'll say we didn't know of certain students' needs at the time I was putting this budget together. It's almost a year in advance. So if a child moves in July, I haven't budgeted for them in the 18-19 year, but I have to provide services for them, which is why I made the comment that we might be taking money out of the special education trust fund for unanticipated costs. But I'm going to reflect them in the 19-20 budget.
All I'm saying is that, and you can do whatever you want with the proposed budget, but the default budget is being, I think, artificially inflated.
Amy, I got a question on that. I mean, would it make sense that I know, and I haven't been on the committee for a while, but I know Mr. Capkin gave us kind of some detail about basically where the students were placed, how they were placed. At least give us some sense, or maybe Steve some sense of what was added versus last year and this year. You know, you have 2 additional students that are going to private school, or that are having extra services. That may be very helpful, at least kind of explain it a little bit.
My only concern is if I give too much detail, then it might be identifiable to a student.
I think the way Mr. Catkins presented it, I thought was kind of very, it wasn't very revealing.
I mean, I can come back to the next meeting and tell you the general number of students.
It could be general, just to kind of give us a comparison, that's all. And it may help Steve kind of understand a little bit too.
I have a question. So we could currently have a student, or let's say last year we had a student that was under special education. And that student's situation could drastically change. In other words, from one year to the next. In other words, we were educating them in Greenland Central School this year, but next year it's been determined that we don't have the capability in Greenland, and we have to send them to another LEA. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Would you feel uncomfortable saying from one year to the next, gee, we had a student change that previously was in Greenland School and now is going to another LEA?
There are some students that have moved in that caused us to have unanticipated costs.
No, that's maybe.
So I didn't.
Maybe I didn't ask the question right. Because one of the reasons it seems like over my time in the budget committee that sometimes we don't get answers is because, well, we can't tell you that because we can't identify who the student is, which I fully agree with. My question is, without mentioning any names, just saying, we have a student that last year we were able to fulfill his IEP in Greenland School, but next year we're not going to be able to. He has to be tuitioned to another school. Is that an unfair question for us to ask and one that you couldn't answer?
I could say that we have a, when we created the 18-19 budget, there were students that were not in out-of-district placements that are going to be in out-of-district placements.
Okay. Okay, perfect.
I guess it's a,
Okay.
I don't mean to be difficult, I just
No,
say
I
really
understand.
on special ed.
Okay.
But
So
I,
is
but I
that-
will get the comparison for you.
So
I think just this whole.
I guess the question then, the $100,000 that Steve is asking about, is that part of that $100,000?
I believe so, I was just looking at that
Okay,
section.
okay.
Pat, yes?
Hypothetical example could be, that person has already transitioned out, and we know it's gonna bring that status to the balance
Right.
of, you know, his educational life.
Right.
So, that's hypothetical. Another hypothetical question, answer is possibly somebody in the kindergarten entering the, or preschool, I'll take that back, preschool entering. So, there are things that they have very good visibility on that they're identifying coming down the road. This, and I'm sure Sarah has a whole, you know, bucket load of other situations that have occurred like that.
Right, the only reason I bring it up is because I think it is difficult. For example, Steve says, oh, yeah, I see $100,000. And to not get any answer about where that $100,000 came from at all, it seems to me, if we knew that it was a student that last year was at Greenland School, this year can't be, to just say, hey, last year we had a student, and that's a lot of that $100,000. And then his question's answered.
Well, and my point is also that that's all well and good for the operating budget, but I'm not sure it's allowable in the default budget.
But I'm legally obligated to provide the services agreed upon in the IEP, so that law allows me to put it into the default budget. I'd be violating federal law if I did not adhere to the signed IEP.
Okay.
Right, and that's part of the reason we have legal fees for special ed. Because sometimes it comes to arguing over whether
I got a
we agree
question.
on the IEP or not.
How far, well, these other schools, are they centrally located, or are they out of state, or what?
Both.
They're
We
both.
try to find placements that are at least the least restrictive environment. Sometimes they're close by, sometimes they're far, depending upon the age of the student, depends on the length of the trip, you know,
And we
so
pay for transportation and everything, right?
we do require part of the IEP. And it's an unfunded mandate from the state. They
I
really
know,
do not
I
provide
know.
us much support in that. So we do not get as much in catastrophic aid as we should. So,
Thank you. I have another question. Art teacher, okay, Mary,
okay.
yeah, nice gal,
Yes, she is.
hell of a ball player.
Is she?
Oh, I wish she played for me. She knew,
Yes. She came from Barnstead. Hired her when I was there.
and this is the amount that you're paying her?
Yes, sir.
How much experience does she have?
Well, when I was in Barnstead. So I was at Exeter for 6 years before I came here. And she was a new teacher when I was in Barnstead, so she's got quite a few years of experience.
That's all I want to know. I mean, because I just met her, well, a couple of weeks ago, and it stunned me that she was teaching here. I didn't know where she came from. I didn't know she was brand new.
Brand new to us, but
Brand
not.
new to us, but not experience-wise.
Correct.
Okay, that's all I wanted.
So I didn't receive any questions from the budget committee, but I'm assuming there must be some other questions that you've gone through the budget and come up with. That can't be your only question. Who's Mary Dang?
Well, I think on the high school tuition, I did go through how they calculate it, and it is what it is, it's part of the contract. and I understand that. And I also, what I looked at was your average, your 5-year average. Is there any reason why we can't use a 3-year average versus a 5-year average?
Well, it's actually what Mr. Catkin used to do. That's actually his sheet.
Well, the reason why I say that, I mean, obviously, if we use a 3-year average, it may be more realistic. And I don't know if the school's gonna have any building going forward, I don't see that, but is it possible that we can use a 3-year average versus the 5-year average? It lowers a little bit, not a lot, but it does go down. It goes down, let me see. It's 31,000 versus what was in there. I mean, it goes down 31,000, I think. So it's a little over a percentage difference. It goes from your 17,511 to 17,258. So I use 102.33 because I used the last 3, which seems to be fairly reasonable versus those 2 high years in there. I don't know what caused those, but
I'm not sure if they have a collective bargaining agreement.
I think it was a decrease if I used the new versus the old. It reduces the total of 2,924. It decreases it like 39,000 in the budget. Does that make sense to use that?
I mean, it makes sense. I would just say I'd want to find out, because probably the year that there was a 6.29 and a 5.25 was probably a year of a collective bargaining agreement. So if I look out, they could be at the end of their CBA, which then means I could get a substantial bump next year. So I would just contact Steve Bartlett and say, hey, are you in a collective bargaining year? If he says yes, then I might lean saying we probably don't want to shave off that money, because when they have their CBA increases, usually there's some kind of changes to how much they're getting per year, changes to the health insurance, those types of things, which are cost drivers. But it's
yeah, I mean, there could be changes forward, and I thought about the collective bargaining. I don't know if that's gonna happen or not, but I mean, that's a good point. The other thing I'd like to see on that, just kind of do a comparison. You gave the actual hard numbers on your booklet, and thank you for that. Is it possible that we could get, I know they're probably in various amounts, what the estimated amounts, so if we can compare them with the actual amounts to see what the differences are? Like, at least for 10 years anyways. You don't have to do
forecast versus actual.
Yeah, I'd just like to see what the forecast is.
I was gonna say, we've been pretty close, and Amy, correct me if I'm wrong, but our forecast versus actual has been pretty close, other than the year the budget committee asked us to reduce our numbers, right?
Yeah, we can just see if it makes sense to reduce it. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. It's just kind of some stuff thrown out there. Just finding some way to reduce something.
We have pretty good numbers with the calculations that Amy does, plus the 8th grade kids. We know the numbers in the 8th grade kids. We estimate that a few of them are gonna go to private school. But historically, it's been 3, I think we're averaging 3 people, 3 children out of 8th grade. So we're pretty close, John. Numbers work pretty well.
Yeah, because last year, and I'm just really looking at the estimate versus the kids. So I know we have some money in the reserve for over and under. That was the purpose of that. But I'm just kind of getting an idea of, because I do have the numbers of the actual students, and they don't, it doesn't look like it varies that much. But I just want to look at the estimates versus what the actuals were. Okay, so I know sometimes if you're using a 5-year average, you are it's the only way you can do is estimate. I understand that.
Well, but what we use, just so you know, is we use the October 1 number, which I provided that information for you. So we use the hard numbers of the students we know. The only reason why I'm really on trying to stick with the numbers that are in the system is, for example, Newcastle. Last year I had 7 families move into Newcastle, and I was in a deficit appropriation because I didn't have enough money. So we try to stick with what we know rather than shaving off students for cost savings, because as Randy said, we're usually pretty close.
I'm not looking at reducing the students. The students are the students that I saw.
Oh, you're just talking about the tuition?
I'm just talking about the tuition where we're using the 5-year average versus the 3-year average. So if we get an idea how close we were, and I know the students fluctuate. I'm just trying to see over the last maybe 5-6 years what our estimates are versus the actuals that came out per student. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you were talking about the number of students.
Like, I may not have been clear.
I can look to see how far back Mr. Catkin's records go for what he estimated for, and hopefully I can tell if he used the 5-year average or if he used Mr. Bartlett's number, but I've got that down here to see.
Yeah, I don't get it.
But we should have estimates versus actuals. I mean, we know what we paid tuition for, and we know what we budgeted, so
So I
I
just have
think
to find.
that's all that's all.
Yeah, and all I would do on this is to take your sheet here, because I thought it was well done, to just kind of add that in there, and the number of students, and I think it just gives a fuller picture. So if anybody has any questions about it, then I think that will answer it. Okay.
I have a question in reference to grants that are available to the school. I see that we received $60,000 state and federal grant. Do we actively have a department that goes out and tries to ascertain what grants could be available for our school system?
We do not have a grant department. Unfortunately, the grants that we receive from the state are getting smaller and smaller every year. Currently, we get an IDA preschool grant that we consolidate amongst all of SAU 50 schools, because if we broke it out into the pieces of each school district, there's not much you can do with all those pieces. So we consolidate it, and that's how we run our preschool. We use grant funds to run most of our preschool. We do get Title IIA funds, which is professional development. We get Title I, which is for reading.
Is all of this in the 60,000? Now, how do we make that 60,000 a lot bigger?
Talk to the feds.
Well,
That's because that's federal money that we receive.
Yes.
We used to receive REAP funds, but the federal government decided what rural was considered, and believe it or not, Greenland's not considered rural. Newington is. Newington is the only one that still gets refunds in our district. So we lost those funds. But a lot of your federal funding is based on free and reduced numbers, on your ESOL numbers, your English as a second language. You know, there's a lot of factors that go into what the federal government gives us. Finding money outside of federal money, they do apply for please help me out with this one, the Clipper Foundation. They also provide private grants. Our teachers provide.
Who is actively trying to?
Let me add to that, Frank. Yeah, so the whole administration and the school board included, we have an association that we partner with. They send out notifications on a regular basis about what's available out there sometimes, right? So case in point, we had security grants that came out of the state that Tamara and the team did a fantastic job getting some money for us to put in cameras, security features at the school. And that in return, we got grant money from the state because of that. So there is other avenues for us to be out there, and right now I guess it's best effort with Sal and the team that looks at these notifications from our associations and understand what grants are available.
I think going out and seeking some of these grants rather than, we need to designate a person or a department to be responsible to go out and try to obtain funds in these grants. And it's not just the school department. We're talking about your budget here tonight. But we don't have that with the town pretty much either. And I can't help but tell you that other communities get substantially more than what this town is getting for grants. And I think it's an avenue that we're losing on, and we should take another look at. Sir, how do you feel about that?
I'm with you. The grants that Mr. Bonnell referred to were not, don't want to mislead and compare them to like Title IIA or Title I grants. Those are annual and based on need. However, the public school infrastructure grant was pretty much a one-time offering. The state came up with approximately $10 million of funds available to each of the school districts across the entire state. And then there was an application deadline, and Principal Halley and members of the central office put in the applications for the enhancements that you heard about.
Do you get notifications on all these grants? Probably not. I would think that you'd have to have somebody designated to go see what might be available to us beyond the state. Yes.
Was it Pat Welch?
At least in my tenure on the board, we've been pursuing grants. An example of that would be we work with our state representative on pursuing a grant for the boiler system at the school, so we could get that changed out. However, as you dig into the grants, a lot of them are targeted towards more rural communities. So many times Greenland does not pass the litmus test as being rural enough or having the right population number. The second point I'd like to make is, and this is an upbeat note, that we will be getting some funding from the state as far as full-time kindergarten. So that's something that will be picking in.
Is that into this budget?
I would
It's a
assume that
revenue.
Amy has
It's
got that
in here,
calculated.
President. And last but not least, thinking about the financial end of the world here, is that, central purchasing doesn't exist here in this town. And, the school department might buy toilet paper, the office here might, and of course, if you get into volumes of things and where you have the numerous towns involved, doesn't it pay to consider something along those lines?
I'll respond to that one as well, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
We're currently working with the other districts. We have a couple of members that are going to be on a collaboration team, so we're looking at, bulk purchasing on some of those commodities and those items, and they're going to actually start meeting within the next couple of months here. So,
And that, of course, is the school side of things. How do we incorporate the town side into all of these things to make it all a financial picture that is better for us? As you all know, we don't have a lot of new tax revenue coming into this town, and we have a lot of wants.
I'll respond to that one as well.
Sure.
And this is hopefully the last one. An example of us collaborating with the town would be the disposal costs increasing. Amy went over there and talked with Karen to see if we could combine, because of the price of the commodity going down, if we could create enough bulk volume so that we could get that price back up again. And unfortunately, it was a no-win situation. So we're constantly, in essence, out there looking at all kinds of ways to economize on these issues.
I just don't know if we have a department that is actively pursuing this.
So I think, but we have good liaisons, right? Amy talked to Karen, so I think you're right, Frank. We probably could have some synergies there. Maybe Amy and the town administrator can get together, as Amy's also the head of the maintenance, buildings and maintenance. So.
Oh, good. I have more
Young
questions.
lady in the back, the assistant principal, please.
Assistant superintendent, but just some other information for you in terms of educational grants. A lot of them are very specific, and they're also, they have this lovely term called support but not supplant. They won't fund anything that they feel the local district should be providing anyway, so it's something above and beyond. We also look at them very carefully because whatever we use the grant for, whatever we put in place using the grant, then after that we usually own it. So if there's upkeep or other expenses that go along with what we did the grant for, that becomes part of the operating budget. So when we look at these grants, we really are careful about the extension for years to come if we do those particular things. So those are some things that we also have to think about in terms of education grants.
And that goes back to the police department a number of years back, where they were also offered grant money to add to the labor staff. And then all of a sudden, of course, we, the town, then had to take that over. So you do have that, but you are able to defray some of the expenses.
To that point, Tara's on my speed dial right now because I call her about once a month and ask her if there's any grants out there from Homeland Security as far as having a security personnel at the school. So
she's very good about that.
I call her and check constantly, and she's checking constantly within her communities and with the chiefs of police in the state.
Jamie?
That's good news about the security grant. I didn't know that. Now, my question is, sure we budgeted monies for security system last year, right? So how much of that grant money took up the budget money? Or how much did you save? And where is that money now?
We didn't save because it put infrastructure in. We put in security cameras. We put in card readers. All the doors were actually rekeyed and locked. So it wasn't necessarily a savings from the security line, because we still have a security company that monitors the building. But now we have, when you go to the front of the school, you actually have to buzz in and there's a camera that sees you. So those were upgrades to the infrastructure.
Gotcha.
unfortunately, they do have costs to them because then we had to upgrade the bandwidth because we now had cameras and, there is an operating cost sometimes as Kelly had pointed out to putting in the, receiving the grants. It does eventually cost you money in the long run.
Just one last point about the public school infrastructure grants. It did not come with 100% funding. The Greenland School Board was very diligent and supportive of matching the one criterion of a 20% match. So they had to take a vote, and in order for us to receive those funds to do those enhancements, the board committed 20% to each of the 6 applications that went into the state. So I don't want the budget committee to think it was 100% funding coming to the school district.
I understand, I get that. I also get the idea that I think $60,000 should be more in terms of grants on an annual basis to help defray the expenses of the budget. I also have a question now that I know that you're the buildings lady. Can you tell me about what's going on with the fire panel or the fire alarm system for the school that requires 40-something thousand? Can you fill me in on
That was a one-time warrant article to raise and appropriate to replace the fire panel. It was constantly failing and it needed to be replaced and upgraded. So there was a separate warrant article for a one-time purchase to replace the fire panel, and that has been replaced.
So we getting the money and the work's already been done?
Yes, it was done over the summer.
Okay, and the process going forward, how do you purchase this stuff? I mean, there are lots of things, you talked about the trash, I've been a building guy for 50 years, I know what roofs cost, and I have a good feel for this stuff. But I'm wondering, how do you go about getting a contractor or a product? Do you solicit several bidders on the project? Who gives you the bid list? Do you go with the COIs and, make sure that we're covering ourselves? How do you do that stuff?
Well, we do decide if there's a big project, you go out and get multiple bids. Depending upon what the project is, you may enlist the help of an architect or an engineer to say, I need you to help me write these specs.
And we have this all in-house?
No, I usually call people I know.
Thank you.
You better call Frank.
I call in favors.
Oh.
Well, it's a small state. I used to work at SAU 16, so it's Exeter, all of that. I managed $100 million over there. I'm very good friends with the facilities director over there, and I'll call him up and say, have you heard of this? What about this? I need this. And,
Relationships are important.
Yeah.
Make the world turn.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could help you with some of yours.
Well, now that I know you're a building guy of 50 years,
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
be calling you.
He is. Are we gonna play games with the boiler again this year?
Always,
Let's get that out of the way, huh?
always.
Is there gonna be a warrant article on this?
We're not talking about that tonight, Mr. Preston.
They're keeping you in suspense, Bob.
I want to come back and see you again.
You're gonna be back in 2 weeks.
I need a reason to see you again.
Sure you do.
Does anybody else have any other questions that you want?
Yeah, we got any issues with the boiler this year. You've been having a warrant article.
I
You want to come back and
always
see him? You may not want to come back and see me.
Yeah.
Hi.
Might wanna come back, see Frank, he's up.
Everybody has smiling faces this time.
Jamie.
I'd like to talk more about the technology position.
Mhm, yes.
So, does RI have their own technology coordinator?
2.
They have 2.
One and a half.
Okay.
Nina does a lot of tech integrator in the classroom, and then Ann is there. Yeah, but they have 2 buildings, yeah.
Okay.
We found during the audit that they're everywhere. I don't want to say Greenland, so please don't reflect in the minutes. I'm just talking about Greenland. There were a lot of things that were lacking day-to-day, operations. Some updates were missing. For Greenland, the server did crash, so we didn't have a plan in place of testing backups and those types of things because we need somebody, even for the SAU office. I'm literally on the phone with somebody going, I can't do this in my office because I don't have a tech person. We don't have anybody dedicated SAU-wide. That's one of the items that's in the SAU budget. But we found that the schools with the number of students, the staff, the devices, the new HB 1612, the requirement from the state on, we have to catalog apps. What information are they collecting? What privacy policies do they have in place? Are they following? I mean, there's this whole laundry list of what the state now requires us to do when it comes to technology and our students, which is an unfunded mandate by the state. So when I put those monies in this budget, I have no choice. They're making me do it. We found that at Greenland, we really needed someone that could pay attention to keeping the devices running, keeping the systems running every day, all year. It's really not a school year position, which it has been in the past. It was a teacher that over time, years and years and years ago, evolved into taking care of the technology, but also teaching. And we just have so many requirements on us from bandwidth, telephones. We have IP phones. So we have internet phones. We have whatever apps are being, they have to be managed. Projectors, everything.
PA system.
During the summer, all the
Which still
computers.
fails.
Yeah. All the computers need to be brought back into the school and wiped clean to make sure there are no apps or anything that are on the devices that shouldn't be, and all of that takes time. So after looking at the audit and looking at the needs of the schools, the school board decided that really it was in the best interest to have a full-time, year-round employee to manage everything in the building.
Does the SA, didn't a couple years ago the SAU have a technology coordinator or something?
Yes, before Mr. Petralia came, I believe.
I believe in the FY 2012 year, it was about 2 or 3 years before I arrived. I arrived in July of 2014.
So there isn't one now then?
There is not one now.
Well, this coordinator that we believe we need full-time, don't the other schools need that assistance also? And couldn't this be a position that would take care of the SAU and the cost be shared?
There's actually a position that's being put into the SAU budget that would be a technology administrator that would oversee all of the school districts to make sure that they are in compliance following HB 1612, that the platforms that we're using are the same across the board to come and get savings on purchasing. Because right now, Newington has 54 kids, Newcastle has like 49 kids. Their buying power is not the same as if we included them in with Greenland and Rye. The SAU-wide technology administrator would be able to leverage those types of things because they'd be overseeing technology as a whole. The Ann Hoyt, we call it the Ann Hoyt position, which is at Rye, is what we're proposing over at Greenland, is a day-to-day person that's in Greenland, managing Greenland and Greenland's needs. Newington and Newcastle have a contracted service, and actually the recommendation according to the audit is for them to increase their level of service. They're at, getting by, but there's actually talk of that they really should have a higher level of service in those buildings because the need, in Newington and Newcastle, they have iPads for their older, from I believe grades 3 to 6. So you've got someone that has to maintain those all the time, update them. When students come in, you have to have somebody add them to the database, attach them to the app so they can go to class and they can use the apps that the teachers are using to teach the curriculum.
Yeah, there's a difference, just to add, Mark, there's a difference between someone who's gonna get underneath the desk and do some desktop work versus someone who's gonna perform governance of the new state regulations, right? So we've got differentiation there. And then concerning the shared costs, there are, as Amy had mentioned, there's definitely enough demand for a lower level technologist to keep busy at the school just for all the needs that occur on a regular basis, as well as to update and maintain what's there today. There's a lot of, as you know, there's a lot of infrastructure at the school, including iPads, Chromebooks, projectors, copiers. There's a lot going on.
Right. There's no question in my mind that some. Now, let me go back and just say, I am not a technology guru by any way, shape, or form. I still use a flip phone because that's all I'm capable of. But at any rate, it's a little hard for me, and maybe at one of our follow-up meetings, to say, okay, last year, the year before that, we were working okay. I'm not going to say good, but okay. with a $7,000 and $9,000 stipend. And now all of a sudden, we have to go from what was working okay for a $7,000 or $9,000 stipend is now going to cost us a full-time $48,000 salary. In my mind, it's just going around, could we get by with a part-time $24,000 position?
It's
So that's
really
cost
not
neutral.
a $9,000 stipend. The $9,000 stipend is paid to the teacher for duties above and beyond the workday and outside of their contract period. That's what that stipend was for. But essentially, you had a teacher full-time on contract teaching and taking care of the technology. So we, based on need, reduced a teacher and essentially taking the technology teacher, and please, I'm just using it for clarification, the technology teacher to a classroom teacher. That frees up that salary to pay for the $45,000 technology. You're cutting the cost about half. It's not really a $9,000 technology stipend. If it were that easy, then yeah, I'd say no to it too. But it's not as simple as saying I'm taking $9,000 and I'm going to $45,000.
So,
It's reallocation of assets that we're moving them around to use them
so he was,
most appropriately.
so we're deleting a teacher position. That teacher position that we're deleting, what was that teacher teaching?
You would have rights under the collective bargaining
Yeah.
He was
agreement.
teaching technology.
But we're not getting rid of that teacher, just a position, a classroom position. The assignments of where people will be assigned next year has nothing in this budget. It's just the number of bodies. How many bodies do I need to cover the classrooms? That's how I figured out how many staff members we have. I am not making any assumptions and I'm not making any claims to where somebody will be teaching next year. I want that. It's just the number of bodies per the collective bargaining agreement where they go. Because of things that have happened during the year, we've had a teacher leave, we have a long-term sub. At the end of the year, we won't be posting for that position because we have this technology certified teacher that can help fill a classroom space.
Pat?
One of the major drivers of us recommending this position is we found ourselves extremely vulnerable this summer when the server crashed. And to not have somebody there year-round leaves you in a vulnerable position. Not only did it, we were fairly lucky and we still ended up paying approximately between $10,000 and $25,000 to get ourselves back on our feet again. So I think the ROI is there, Mark, from that standpoint. And it's more of a matter of getting somebody in there that's going to be there and react in a quicker way than saying, hey, I have 4 classes before I can get to that problem. So we don't want to have a more serious situation with the virus or even a larger problem with the servers. So we ended up having to buy new hardware. That's not to mention all the time that we negotiated with the CBA for people to make up for all the information that was lost, which we were pretty creative in doing that because they were wanting to get reimbursed for it. We came up with a very good solution so that they could make up that lost time. So the economy is there.
So the technology stipend, whoever was getting paid the stipend, didn't work over the summer?
It wasn't a full time.
So that, you had no technology except for a contracted person if you were to call them and say, take care of this.
Or we could call this person in, however, it was basically, it was now negotiating with somebody that had other commitments going on because he was not a full-time person.
Wasn't that just a hardware failure though? I mean, would a tech have been able to pick that up? The issue that you had with the server, or did the server just fail?
It was a multiple.
There's some maintenance that needed to be done, yeah. Some we didn't have appropriate backup. So that's something that we would expect on a regular basis.
What is your backup now, if you don't mind me asking? Is it virtual? Is it
Now
table?
we're
Still on
moving,
site.
but we're moving people, we're trying to get people to go virtual.
Gotcha.
Yeah, to Google Cloud.
Sorry, I just had to ask that.
When we just go back to the hardware, what hardware did you purchase? You know, the amount, I see the increase of $54,000, you have 2 technical hardware, replacement, and then you had additional. Can you page 29? with technical hardware replacement and technical hardware additions. And what's the
It's very
difference?
small.
That's it?
So this is it, this is his list of work. In replacement hardware, last year there was a substantial cut to the budget in technology, and we got off cycle for replacement of, staff laptops. Best practices to replace a third, and a third, it had been all at once, so we got off cycle.
So that's the replacement part, replacing the laptop.
Yeah, replacing the laptops. For staff, there is a replacement of some Chromebooks for students, some iPads, some projectors,
Toner, $8,000.
Okay, I'm okay. Okay, just what about the replacement?
the additional.
Well, you had, the replacement was what you just said, the 54, the 80,000? That was what you were just going through?
Yeah. And then under technology additional is 25 new iPads for the K1 and 5 iPad charging stations, with 10 iPads each. I'm gonna know the charging station organizer, will sync up to 30 iPads when extended.
I'm gonna copy that.
But that
When
one,
you get a chance, I'm just trying to get an idea of what it is. Now, is that more of a one-time, are you on cycle, should you stay on cycle?
we will get on
I
cycle.
mean, 'cause I don't wanna, me, it's pay me now, pay me later. If you have to replace it, you gotta replace it, that's normal.
Yeah, so we're, the question is yes, we're definitely on a great cycle for the children, not so much for the teachers. We're trying to get to a better place there. The network is 2 to 3 years overdue to be upgraded. That's a one-time charge. We've got about $14,000 in place for networking. So that won't be reflected into next year. What we want to do going forward, John, I know we're not talking about this tonight, right? But we do want to go with a warrant article and start building up a technology fund so we can start going on to this regular cycle and not have these big hits to the budget on a regular basis.
I think that's good.
Good, yeah.
Very smart.
Because
And to make sure, what I like about, I've said this before about warrant articles, I don't like warrant articles, but warrant articles make you spend the money on what is in the warrant article, so that's what I'm in favor of. And it's no different what they do in the town, they'll have a warrant article for the bulletproof vest. If you put them in the budget, you may not even, if something happens, you don't spend it, so I'm in agreement with that, as long as it's not crazy.
The board, and actually, Tamara got an amazing deal because she found a typo on a website. So we actually bought some, computers for the teachers this year. So we are actually good, that's why when I give you the copy of the sheet, but it doesn't come out perfectly because the board voted to remove some of that technology money because we're buying some this school year. So we're buying 16 or 17 this year, and then we'll do another 30. So then we'll get into that replacement cycle. And then if the trust fund goes through for technology, then I'm the type that you put the money in, and when you take it out, you replace it. Try to get into that cycle at least, so that money is always available.
John? I don't know how I'm gonna word this. I just heard something.
Nicely?
I love technology. I think it's the greatest thing going. I think children should have technology through school. I think I just heard you said iPads for K1.
I did.
Please justify it. Justify it to an old man, please, as to why. I guess maybe I'm a little old-fashioned, but I think if they learn how to use this in one grade of school, I mean, I've got a granddaughter who's in high school that I write her a check and she can't sign it. I'm sorry, it just, I guess if she was in kindergarten and she could transfer it on iPad and send it to the bank, they'd send her, I don't know, I'm sorry, please, but help me out.
So there are different apps that the children can use. They can use them by themselves. They are district-wide testing. Students do that all on the iPad, and the kids are independent with that. So they're learning how to read, they're practicing math skills, and all of that while the teacher's working with someone else. They do center work.
I mean, I'm not in a disagreement with it, I'm just curious, because I have a 5-year-old grandson who's in kindergarten in Portsmouth, okay? But I bought him a Lenovo 10-inch, last year for Christmas. And I mean, this kid's showing me stuff on there that I couldn't believe. But a lot of it his games, he learned his ABCs, he learned how to count on it at the house, so I guess you got a good reason.
Just to add on, the iPads that we're replacing actually came from it's either private donation or a grant.
Okay. And I guess the other reason I bring it up is, an iPad is about 3 times much more than a, what is it,
Chromebooks.
yeah,
Yeah, they are.
or the Fire thing.
Go ahead.
Just to add, I have a second grader. My daughter, I never let my kids use tablets at home. I just, I think that if you're learning at school, that's one thing.
How they do their homework.
Well, in first grade, she wasn't doing it on a tablet. But what I'm saying is, there was an app that was through the school, Raz Kids, which is in the budget for this year also, and it was just amazing. And I have to say that that's the one reason why I let her use tablets at home, because she wants to come home and she wants to read on Raz Kids, because she listens to the words, then she reads it herself, and she answers questions about comprehension and whatnot. And so these devices and these apps are so useful and helpful for kids who may not learn this way or this way. It's just a different way of learning.
Like I said in the previous, I hope I didn't get this so it sounded wrong. I just was curious as to why they're doing it.
We're too old folks. Yes, young lady in the back.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know that in terms of technology, they still do both. We still have paper, pencil, and it is another tool. It's very much a tool that many of the materials that we use to support kids and their learning now comes through technology. But it is just a tool. And they're not on those all day long, all the time. The teachers are very good about choosing the best purpose for that tool and when to use it. So it is very different than how your grandkids or your kids might be using it, or how you may even see young kids using tablets and phones and whatnot out in the community. It's very different. It has an educational purpose. We're very strict about that, if you will, and they don't just use it just to use it. So, and we do still have both.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions here while we still?
I do.
Oh, okay, Steve.
I just want one more question about the default, well, it's on the default budget, page 38. There's an increase of $64,000 approximately in the SAU budget. Can you just put some light on that, please?
So you're asking for the change for the district portion of the SAU budget?
Correct.
Okay. The SAU budget was presented to the joint board a few weeks ago. And in that is a recommendation from the technology audit that we received to have a technology administrator district-wide. So the net of that, we also had some other changes in staffing. We made some reductions in some time of staffing. So the net result, that 65, is partly, well not partly, is I want to say all because of that technology person, but it's also based on Greenland's portion, how it's calculated by the state. That changes from year to year based on your student enrollment and the valuation of the properties. So as those change, the budget may say that the budget stays absolutely flat. Your portion from year to year would change based on the value of your property and the number of students you have enrolled in the district.
And that's justified to put into the default budget?
It is because it's protected by state law. Once the SAU joint board votes on it after its public hearing on December 19th, that goes into all of the local budgets as is and cannot be amended.
So Greenland has no say in it whatsoever?
The Greenland School Board does when they vote at the joint board meeting on the 19th.
Right, but the citizens of Greenland had nothing to say about it.
Correct, because the budget is protected, that line item is protected because as a whole, they agreed to that budget, and if one community said they weren't going to pay their portion, then the operating budget for the SAU would not be able to happen. So that is protected.
Okay, Steve?
It has to be.
Okay.
I got one more question about technology. Is, like, moving forward, like down the road, is your thought still to keep technology independent for each school, or is the SAU gonna eventually take over
I think that would be
technology budget? I mean, the only reason why I'm thinking that is because you're thinking a technology coordinator for the SAU, then all of a sudden, hey, Rise says, Greenland's getting new iPads, why aren't we getting new iPads? The complaint comes to you, So is it gonna be like, hey, we gotta do even Steven throughout all the school districts, or what is your thought on this? Because technology seems to be a very important piece, and it always is a hot topic.
The only way for the SAU to control technology would be to put that into the SAU budget, which I don't think anybody is necessarily in the favor of, because that would spike the SAU budget.
But you're gonna pay for it anyways.
I know, but that's just, we try not to put things into the SAU budget that might be more local control, but if you have the technology administrator could say, oh, they use iPads, they use Dells, they're using Promethean boards, they're using smart boards, and have the conversation with the school board to say, hey, if I got you all on the same platform, we'd be able to save money. If everybody went to Dells, I could save you money. So that would be the conversation we could have at the SAU level, but the individual districts would still have control. Newcastle would probably still want iPads, because that's what Newcastle, they prefer Apple devices. I've used both. It doesn't really matter to me, but it's kind of the climate and culture of the building and what you're trying to offer. At a high school, they like Apples because there's photography software and all sorts of different levels that you're using data and engineering software that you want a higher level, something that has better graphics. Where at the school, Dell is okay for 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. There's a conversation you could have on having one-to-one devices where you say you get a device in 5th grade and you keep it, you bring it home, you do your homework assignments on your Chromebook.
The high school started that this year.
Did they?
Freshman year.
Yeah, and that's your device all year. That's a something that, is that what the board and the community is open to? Because that is a continued expense, because you keep buying a Chromebook for each 5th grade class, if that's where you were to start it. And it would always be rotating. And then when they leave at the end of 8th grade, usually you tell them to take it because it doesn't have much value for you and you'd have to dispose of them. So you say, write me $1 and you take that device, it's yours. And they usually, as Rain said, they get a new one when they go to Portsmouth High School. And it's a one-to-one device.
So far our philosophy, Jamie, is there is definitely, we lean on the principal to decide how the technology is going to be run in their school, right? But we do expect some standardization across the SAU and some conformity. There are certain things that we can do the same that would make things easier and cheaper for everybody. But at some point, there's definitely different needs in each school system. There's different applications teachers are using. We have a lot of applications.
Usage.
Yeah, usage. Like Amy said, Chromebooks versus iPads. But anyway, I think at some point we're probably going to get there to a more unified approach. And I think schooling is going to change in general anyway. Just look at VLAX, right? Virtual online teaching to kids. People are taking this to supplement Greenland School today. So I think we're going to see a virtual schooling versus physical schooling converge at some point, even more so than it is today.
Is that what we're seeing in the budget? Because I noticed that the internet, the 533 accounts, they all have increases in it.
Yeah, we didn't have the internet. We did not have the bandwidth to be able to run the apps. If there's testing, also we went to we went to internet phones, so we needed to increase the bandwidth in order to be able to have a clear phone conversation.
Okay, so you're increasing all those because your utilization is going to be higher because you have increased bandwidth.
Okay. Security features.
Security features.
And we still don't have redundancy, so we've lost the internet, and unfortunately classrooms had to do different types of presentations because there's no internet, right? So there's things we need to improve on in the future.
And I think the committee that the joint board is forming to go into collaboration, how can we work through joint purchasing, will eventually, I think, give savings to all of the districts by using that.
Okay. Any other questions at this time? Okay, Amy, I want to thank you very, very much. You did a nice job. I really particularly like the information that you gave us in the back of the book.
We did lots of
That's
information.
been a long time coming. I read all of that.
So can I just ask?
Very good. I like
Keep
it.
it in every single year.
I do put it in. I put most of
Every
that in
year.
last year,
Yeah.
just in case you don't keep your book, which
I
I don't
keep
know
them.
why you wouldn't.
I keep them.
If you have any questions you come across, please send them to
Yes.
Mr. Casco or to Randy, and they'll forward them to me. And then I'll shoot everybody back those responses. I have the special ed comparison students, what it would look like if it was a 3-year average versus 5-year average for Fort Smith High School. The number is that, and also for the 10 years to see what the history has been, the forecast. And then I'm going to give you a copy of the technology.
Great, thank you so much. Good job on the budget, by the way.
Thank you.
One final question. I mean, how long have you got to go in the bond? Couple of years?
22, I thought it was 20. It's
In the book.
22.
It's in the book.
Hey, you only got this book last Friday.
There's no pictures even.
I dropped it off on Tuesday.
I was busy.
There's a pop-up in the middle, Bob. There's a pop-up.
Yes. Next time I'll make like sparkles come when you open the book.
Mark, you had one
I
final
just wanted
question?
to thank the members of the school.
I was just gonna do that.
Say
You go right ahead.
thank you for all that. Thank you.
Okay,
Hey, Bob, you want that?
yes, thank you. Amy?
Yes, sir.
Any questions? What's that?
Uh,
You all done?
One before me.
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
I did not cover on mine.
Yeah, before.
Okay. I have the motion, please. I have a motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor? Okay, we'll see you next, we'll see you Thursday.
Again? I'm sorry.
He was trying to get it quiet so I could make a motion she could hear him.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh. That thing.
Thanks, Amy, that was great.
Thank you.
We gotta live by that.
That was easy.